South African Communist Party General Secretary Solly Mapaila has called on voters across the world to be mindful of the leaders they elect into office, as this may have an adverse impact on governance. He was addressing a joint march outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria, which was held to protest against the recent capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro by the American military. Let's take a listen to this first.
The American people have to look into how they conduct their democracy, how they elect their leaders. We can't just bring any populist just because he's rich, he can buy the vote, he can campaign into office. They have to think hard about this question. Even us in South Africa and the rest of the continent, we have to be careful about the people that we elect into offices. Because now money speaks more.
All right, let's unpack this further now with Muhammed Desai from the SA Latin America Association. He joins us in studio tonight. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for making the time. You were part of the picket today. You are one of the civil society organizations that participated there. Why was it important for you to have your voice heard?
It was a phenomenally successful day, and for us it was successful because it brought about a diverse group of South Africans from various organizations, trade unions and political parties. And the message was, on the one hand, in condemnation of the U.S. invasion and kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, but also it was reaffirming our solidarity and our support as South Africans for the people of Venezuela, a country that has been through immense hardship, but even with that hardship has made incredible gains when it comes to housing, when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare and other forms of socioeconomic parameters.
I'm glad that you mentioned that history about Venezuela, particularly when you say, yes, it's experienced hardship, but if you look back a little bit, people were actually receiving homes. But that was during the era of Hugo Chavez. That was the late president of Venezuela. Nicolás Maduro, it has been a different story. And this is where I would like for us to concentrate on, because you are a civil society organization. Yes, this was not only a protest about the kidnapping or capture of the president of that country alongside his wife. It's also about international law. Nicolás Maduro has not been a model president to his own people. Extrajudicial killings have been mentioned in Venezuela during his reign. How do you justify that as a civil society organization? Because some people are saying, actually, good riddance.
Sure. So I think that maybe two things are important to point out. The first is that the hardships that the Venezuelan people are experiencing, the primary cause, without a shadow of a doubt, are the economic sanctions and the financial measures that are being put by the United States. This is a country that is sitting with all of these oil reserves. It's not able to sell its oil simply because the United States has decided that there's an embargo on that country. The United States, for example, expropriated over 4,000 filling stations in the last 3 years that belonged to the Venezuelan government that were based in the United States, together with 3 oil refineries. These are worth billions of dollars. In addition to the revenue stream that was coming off, the actual assets have been expropriated. The company is called Citgo. There is $2 billion worth of gold, for example, sitting in the Bank of England, which the English are refusing to hand over to Venezuela. And Venezuelan government under Nicolás Maduro asked for the monies from the Bank of England to simply be used for healthcare, and yet England refused. But to come down to the issues that you're raising, specifically about Nicolás Maduro's actual leadership, I think that I was present during the elections last year in Venezuela. And on the one hand, you see the very fact that you have opposition parties vociferously and vocally participating in elections there, I think is actually an indication of a democracy. Secondly...
But why would one of those opposition leaders flee the country fearing for her life?
She chose to go under her own accord. The Venezuelan government gave her protection. The Venezuelan government insisted that she is not an enemy of the state until the stage of her calling for military intervention. Now, any country would not be tolerant of the idea of military intervention being called on their own state.
The people of Venezuela are very poor. In fact, if South Africans, if we traveled as much, we would actually realize that the people there are probably slightly worse off than we are in this country when it comes to poverty. Why is that for an oil-rich country?
So again, two factors. The one factor is that I think that just over 2.7 million homes have been built in the last 5 years, addressing the housing issue. Poverty has reduced from 70% down to 27%. Now, these are, even though there are sanctions, even though there is what I would call theft by the United States, the reason that they are poor, in many ways, you can compare this to, say, the pre-1994 period, where you had a government that used its resources only, the gold and the silver and the platinum from our country, was used to only enrich a certain elite part of our society. Likewise, in Venezuela, pre the days of Chavez, before the days of Chavez, before 1998, it was a country where the oil revenue was solely used to enrich the elite. Today, that oil resources are being used to empower the entirety of that society. Yeah. However, the United States doesn't allow any country across the world that wants to forge its own independent path in the global community. The sanctions are crippling. The idea of being cut off from financial institutions is devastating. However, there is hope, and that hope is that Venezuela, together with other global South countries, are finding alternative partners in the world where we are not subjected to the domination of the US.
As we conclude the conversation, Muhammad, ultimately, this is about the defense of international law. What President Trump has done, leaders the world over, even with some European leaders who have been almost tongue-tied this week, trying to make justifications for what he's done. But they know the truth, that what he has done goes far beyond the rules. This also has to do with national sovereignty that's got to be defended and the right of people to determine their own futures, and that means determining who is going to rule their country. Yes, you've organized this in South Africa. I'd be keen for you to tell us what the turnout was, and in conjunction, therefore, with that, why should South Africans be interested in something that's happening so far away from them?
So it was an emergency protest. We had about 300 or 400 people that converged at the USA embassy. And for us, it's on the one hand, yesterday it was Libya, it was Iraq, it was Afghanistan. Today, there are false charges being made around Venezuela. Tomorrow, it's going to be, oh, South Africa is committing a white genocide, and therefore, this necessitates a US intervention. And so for us, it's really about creating a world in which we stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, that we dispel the kind of myths that are promoted. The idea of white genocide is absolutely absurd by all parameters. I mean, but this is still something that the United States is trying to force on South Africa. And the reason why is because we have equal trading partners across the world, because we have an independent global outlook. Likewise, we saw this here in Iraq and in Libya, where there were accusations of weapons of mass destruction that was completely false. And similarly, we would argue that in Venezuela, we are being told that the president is apparently the head of a drug cartel and that he is drug trafficking. We insist that there's not a shred of evidence, even by the DEA itself. If don't take it from me, read the own United States Drug Enforcement Agency's reports. For the last 5 years or the last 10 years, Venezuela is not on the list of countries supplying drugs to the United States. This kind of fabrication is something that the US is using to intervene and to interfere in another country.
You suggesting, I know we're closing off, you suggesting that Trump could use the white genocide claim, as false as it is, without any shred of evidence, he could use that as some kind of pretext to try and invade this country.
Not only him, but the United States itself. And there's precedent. Look at Iraq. It was completely baseless, the weapons of mass destruction. Look at Venezuela. It's completely baseless, and we are convinced that the court cases that will come out of this year will prove that. And likewise, many of us know that there is no white genocide in South Africa, and yet the US is imposing certain measures on us, even though the white genocide is baseless.
Worrying developments indeed. Muhammed Desai, thank you very much for talking to us tonight. He is with the South Africa Latin America Association.